Oh, not much, guys. Richard, congrats on your Rebels. That College World Series was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here in a couple weeks. Guys, did 3 years ago when it was here.
Yeah, it was a cool deal in Atlanta. So back right there in the shadow of the College Football Hall of Fame, and I don't even know if we're quite ready to go into what are the storylines for SEC Media Days going to be. Let's just start here though, Barrett. We've talked, I think, about every team in the SEC. We've kind of tried to highlight some things, and this is one of those years where I feel like, and no disrespect intended, outside of Vanderbilt, there's a pretty compelling storyline, at least a storyline, for every team in the league.
Yeah, there is. I think even for a team like Kentucky with the Will Levis deal, Tennessee with, Hendon Hooker being a dark horse, you can go through some of the teams that maybe have been overlooked. And find a very compelling storyline. You're 100% right. Some of them good, some of them bad, obviously. But it is a very interesting time. I'm happy, I hope anyway, that there will be actual questions about that asked at Media Days rather than just NIL stuff, because NIL stuff has gotten a little boring in my mind. But, yeah, I mean, it's setting up to be a very interesting year. I really hope that there's not a focus on just the college football playoff. That's been a gripe of mine for a long time because you're right, in the SEC this year, there's going to be plenty to talk about whether a team's a playoff contender or not.
All right, well, let me ask you this. You have been an advocate of the four-team playoff is good, and I'm not even sure, Barrett, you wouldn't be okay with going back to just two teams to play for the national championship. If we want less focus on just the college football playoff, would it not make sense to go a little bit bigger and make it more inclusive so that it's not just these are the four teams and nobody else has got a chance?
Well, there's no doubt that adding to it would give, more teams a chance to get involved in that conversation. And they're just not going to be very good teams. That's my problem with it. And some of them would be, qualified automatically with conference championships. But, I think it's more a case of the 14 playoff inadvertently eliminating some very interesting things, because you really don't talk about anything other than 7 teams in October. And even in the BCS era, I think the Heisman conversation was much more interesting. But in addition to that, you'd have interest in every opponent that any BCS contender was playing. And there were more BCS contenders in November than there are college football playoff contenders in November, even though there's 2 extra teams. So I just think it's a complicated situation, and yeah, you would have more to talk about. But I like other storylines other than the playoff. I love the playoff too, but I mean, there's just so much that goes into college football that I think it's overlooked now.
Let's talk about a couple of teams, and if we've got time, we'll come to Ole Miss and Mississippi State. But there's some other things. Arkansas in the West is a team that is fascinating to me. Kentucky, you mentioned them a second ago in the East, and maybe we'll go to Kentucky and Tennessee after this. But Arkansas, so year one, a lot of excitement, but really not that much. What was it, 3 wins 2 years ago for Sam Pittman? But it felt like things were moving in the right direction, and then they take a big step forward. Is there another step forward this year for Sam Pittman and Arkansas, or is this a year where it kind of levels out a little bit before maybe they are able to take another step?
Yeah, I think the 9-3 record kind of makes it impossible for them to make a huge step forward, just because anything further than where they are right now is essentially contention. So I'm not necessarily thinking that they can do that, but more consistent offensively, absolutely. Stronger, more consistent defensively, absolutely. So, they won 9 wins. They had 9 wins last year. That's obviously, great for them. But to me, I think I wouldn't say stalled out. I just think it's set up for Arkansas now to be what Arkansas was under Petrino, which is a really good team that every couple of years has a moment, catches lightning in a bottle, whether it's Ryan Mallett or somebody else, and contends for not just the SEC West, but a New Year's Six or back then BCS bid. So I just think right now this they've got a small step to go forward to consistently be that 8-9 win team. They're almost there. Maybe that's the step that happens this year, but anything beyond that I think is a little bit aggressive.
There's a team that I feel like is flying under the radar in the East because of what Georgia has done and the separation that they have created. And I think probably this is not the year. I don't think it's going to take long for Billy Napier to get Florida back in the place that Florida fans expect it to be. I know they missed out on Jaden Rashada. He goes to Miami instead. Do you look at the way that kind of quietly Billy Napier is going about his business and think, okay, yeah, they're going to get it right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon just because the recruiting was so bad under Mullen, and, it just takes a little while. And from a transfer portal standpoint, they got some good dudes this year, but nothing that I think would help them, be a contender this year. But, yeah, I think you look at where they are right now, they're recruiting pretty solid. I know there was a message board meltdown over the course of the weekend because of Jaden Rashada, and everyone's mad about the Gator Collective now. But, I think it just takes time to get those bodies in there. And while they did a pretty good job this year in the transfer portal, they're going to probably need to hit it a little harder next year. But I think a strong performance offensively, especially from Anthony Richardson, would certainly accelerate that process. And obviously a lot of NFL folks are all aboard the Anthony Richardson bandwagon. So, I think Florida has the right guy in Billy Napier. I think the biggest thing now is how does he address his personnel issue, because it still exists, not just from a quantity standpoint, but also from a strength and development conditioning standpoint. So he'll get them back. It's not going to be this year. Next year, maybe we'll see how he attacks the portal, and if he does it the right way and get some dudes that can play, then yeah, maybe he does contend next year.
In a 3-year looking into your crystal ball window, are you more bullish on Florida or Tennessee?
Florida. I think Tennessee, it's kind of like that Arkansas, sort of role where they're 8-9 wins, pop up every 3 years to contend for the division. Florida can be a juggernaut still. I think they've got the right guy. But, I think they have to get the personnel in. But when they do that, they absolutely can be the biggest consistent threat to Georgia. And we've all seen Florida, what they've been able to do, throughout the history. So they can be better than Georgia if Napier does it right. And so, yeah, long term, Florida can win a national championship. Tennessee can't, but they can still be really darn good.
When you look at Mississippi State in 2022, what's the most important or the most interesting thing for you as it pertains to Mike Leach's squad?
I'd say Will Rogers and just what he can do. I mean, you look at what he did last year. I mean, you're talking about video game statistics, and I'm talking like good video game statistics, not like the ones I had because I was terrible at that game. But when you go almost 5,000 yards and 36 touchdowns, and you're just sort of like considered okay. Like I think the perception around the country is that, well, Rogers is a good quarterback in that system. Okay, well, what happens if he progresses? What happens if he takes that next step? Are we talking 5,500 yards and 50 touchdowns? Because, I mean, really, it seemed like he was kind of getting his feet wet early on last year anyway. So that to me is interesting to see the development. Mike's obviously very high on him. He's obviously had, his has experience. He needs some wide receiver help. I think we also, see that. But, just what does he become? Is he Gardner Minshew, or is he just like any other old Mike Leach quarterback that puts up video game statistics but it doesn't lead the team anywhere?
All right, less than a minute left, Barrett. I'm going to hand you a $100 bill, and you have to put that $100 on either Jackson Dart or Luke Altmaier starting in Game 3. Which horse are you riding?
Game 3, I would say I'd say Jackson Dart. It might be Jackson Dart Game 1, but I'd say definitely by Game 3. I just think that it does seem like Lane is comfortable with Luke Altmaier, and but probably doesn't see the upside that Jackson Dart does have. So I would say Jackson Dart. If you give me some better odds for Game 1, I might take in Game 1 too.
Okay. Barrett, great catching up. Look forward to seeing you in Atlanta at SEC Media Days in a few weeks. It's been too long. Thanks, my friend.